Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of the Sales Entrepreneur Podcast. I am Daniel McComber, and with me today is Shane Kofoed. Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, good.
Nice.
Awesome. So, Shane, it's so funny because me and you met on a plane.
Yeah.
Flying from Dallas to Utah, right?
Yeah.
And normally, I'm not the kind of guy that likes to start conversation on planes. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I just usually have stuff downloaded, and I'm like doing my own thing.
Well, then you're like stuck talking to the person the whole time.
And it's only a 2.5 hour flight.
Yeah.
But still, it's like it can get long if you're with the wrong person. And I got a buddy that no matter who he's sitting next to, he always talks to him and has like great. Anyways, and so you sat next to me, and I'm like sitting there, and I was watching like my show or something. I was so into it, and then I saw you like pull out your computer, and you were like working on some crazy stuff, and I'm like, this guy might be kind of cool to chat with. And so it was like one of those moments where I was like, what you doing, bro? Like you look like you're kind of doing some cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, you were watching Sopranos, which I need to start still.
So. That's right. Yeah. That's kind of like a guilty pleasure. Like,
did you finish it?
No, it's a long one, dude. I mean, it was a show for like years and years.
Yeah.
That's not one I'm like super proud of. Sorry, Mom. I'm watching Sopranos, but it's a good one. But yeah, man, we just kind of stayed in touch a little bit. And I've just been so like, you're doing some crazy stuff, like events and all this big stuff. What I don't think I've even asked, why are you even in Dallas? Because you live up here in Utah.
Yeah. So we were down there. We have, we'll talk about it, but we have this event series called Nightlight event. And it's a lantern festival, and we tour all around the country. So we have, we've always done really big events in Dallas, south of Dallas. Okay. It's in a city called Ennis. And
you go all the way down to Ennis?
Yeah.
Okay,
it's like 40 minutes south of DFW or something. And so we've gone down there, and what was cool is they've been around. Next year's going to be their 40th year as a racetrack. And it's cool. It's like we've gotten all into the culture with them because they're like an NHRA drag. So think of like Formula One, but drag racing, which is like this huge thing that I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
And we had our event down there for years, and we finally started up some conversations because we really like those guys. And they were like, what are you guys doing to bring out so many people? They're like, we'll have an event, and then we see your event, and there's like 12,000, 15,000 people there. What are you doing? So we just started kind of talking with them about how we sell and market and price our tickets and things. Mm-hmm. And then it's turned into this cool like friendship and partnership. And so
with the city or with the
track? So the track is called Texas Motorplex, and those guys are like, they're awesome. Yeah. And so we've like partnered up on different events, and we're doing all of their ticketing for their events.
Wow.
So it's just kind of turned into this really fun thing. So we have the chance to go down to Dallas a lot. And
cool.
We did an Eclipse event. I think after the flight after I met you, we did this Eclipse event down there.
Oh yeah, I saw you were down in Texas for that.
Yeah. So it's cool. And dude, I love Dallas though. Like Dallas and Fort Worth.
I get a little bit of FOMO because you like guys like you who I meet are in Utah, and then all these guys that I meet through my coaching group are in Utah. I'm like, where were you guys when I lived up here, man? Like I'm living in North Fort Worth, which I love it down there. My wife and I love it down there, and I have, people and connections and work down there. But I find myself coming up to Utah so much more. Yeah. And I'm like, every time I come up here, I try to make it as meaningful as possible, reconnecting with guys like you. And
have you ever stayed at the Drover in Fort Worth?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Dude, that place is so sweet.
We stayed there last time we were there, and I was like, I don't feel like anyone told me how sick the Stockyards is. And
it is. It's like, I'll tell you my first experience about that real quick. So I had never heard of the Stockyards per se. Yeah. It's just when I lived down there back in 2017, my wife and we just got married, and we go down there with our summer sales crew. Yeah. And a couple of the dudes were always like, oh, we're going to go on Neon Moon, which is, it's the only club that's in the Stockyards of Fort Worth. Oh, and for anyone who doesn't know what the Stockyards is, it's like the old timey stockyards, like 100 years ago, where like, cattle were brought into Fort Worth and stuff like that. And they've turned it into this awesome kind of like Park City vibe kind of,
it's like what you wish Jackson Hole was like, right? They're all the shops. It's just so authentic.
And then there's also a nightlife that's a lot of fun. Yeah. And they do rodeos there and stuff like that. Well, they have one nasty club called Neon Moon there. Well, I'd always heard my guys doing it. I went down there before we were planning on moving down there. I went down there by myself to check things out. And anyways, I'm like, well, where's that Neon Moon place? It was nighttime. I had nothing to do. And I like Google it, and I'm like seeing all these shops pop up around it. I'm like, well, I'm not going to Neon Moon. I'm a married guy with like a kid, but I wanted to see. So I show up I was on a different planet. That place is completely different. And I go to the Drover and I'm like walking around. I'm like,
Yeah.
I was wearing my Jordans, some Lululemon pants, like a Lululemon polo and stuff. I've never felt more out of place in my entire life.
Yeah.
Like everyone there is like denim, boots, cowboy hat. And that's one of the things I do love about that area.
Dude, it's cool. It's like, it's funny how, like, I always study consumer, kind of behavior, and you can kind of, I mean, you probably do the same thing. You can kind of look at somebody and you can understand like where they shop, and you even probably know how much money they spent on their outfit.
I hate that, but I do that. Yeah,
I know. It blew me away there, because I think there's kind of a stereotype with, cowboys and rusted out trucks or whatever. And dude, like Lucchese boots, those are like $8,000. Like we went to this spot to get a hat, and they're like, they start at $3,000. I was like,
you getting a Stetson for like crazy, like, these guys are putting money. Like, I thought my shoes were something.
There's like a dude in a $50,000 outfit.
And you wonder why. I used to wonder why they'd walk around with such like, high praise a little bit. I'm like, it's because that dude's wearing like 10 grand.
Yeah, custom boots and all this. I know, it's cool. It's a cool culture.
It is. It's so cool that you kind of branched off and like started doing events down there as well. So I guess you do events in Utah, you do them down in DFW. Have you kind of branched other locations too? Yeah.
So with Nightlights, we have 14 event nights, and we've gotten to where we're doing back-to-back nights, or one of our events in Pennsylvania, we do three nights over 2 weekends, and it's like 35,000 people. And so it's cool. We've just like really rooted into a handful of these. I think it's like 10 different markets that we're in.
Oh, sweet.
And so we just like rooted in, and we just keep working them over to get bigger and bigger. And so it's been fun. Like this year or last year, I should say, we traveled to, I was on a flight like every weekend, and it was just sick. It's like you roll up to, middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and you kind of meet people and hang out and chill, and,
You're
Spokane
seeing things from a totally different point of view, right?
Yeah. It really gives you like a broad landscape of the world, it's pretty cool, or the nation or whatever, but
that is so crazy. So obviously you have a beginning to this. You're at this point now where you're doing these awesome, huge events all over the nation and everything. I guess, did you always plan on being like this, event creator and kind of culture creator, or did you have a different plan when you were getting started?
No, what I think's funny, and I think I was kind of thinking about themes to talk about in a setting like this, or that somebody could pick up and take, and what I've kind of noticed that's been interesting is I always had, so I didn't go to college. I've never even really had a legit job outside of high school. Wow. I started businesses like when I was a senior in high school, and
what was your first one?
It was like an apparel thing. It was called Jive, and we made like t-shirts and stickers and stuff. It was like a goofy thing, but it was, I was doing that while I was a senior in high school. And I remember like, it was difficult to graduate because I started getting money coming in, and I was like, what am I even doing? I'm like,
people like the Jive brand. Huh?
Yeah. It was nothing at the time,
Yeah.
And then I did like mall kiosks for a couple of years, and it just kind of like turned into a thing. But it was interesting because I got a pretty good taste like right out of the gate, and then just got crushed for like years as far as like going through the growing pains of all that.
So you, like, when you're doing it on like a small scale, it was fun. You weren't too concerned with like the money per se.
Yeah,
you were just doing it. But then I guess something changed, and you're like, holy crap, this is actually taking way more work to be successful.
Yeah, I think early on. And this will kind of tie into the whole kind of story and everything. But I think early on I was such a creative product, hey, I want to make something really cool and above all else. And my dad, was like a, classic CPA cubicle, did like rates for like a, public giant company, that kind of thing. And he was always like, watch the books, watch the money. And I was like, dude, you don't get it. You don't get what we're doing, And
you don't get it, Dad.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm making something cool. What would you know? Come to find out, I just got crushed. Because, it's the whole thing of like, if you're buying watermelons for $10 and you sell them for 12 and you're, it costs you $3 to get them, it's like, I didn't have any of that figured out. So
you're super caught up with the like creating and I'm sure you're having fun with it.
Yeah.
But then when push came to shove, you didn't have anything sustainable.
It's almost like the worst place to be in I think you kind of have to go through it when you're getting into entrepreneurship, because you're figuring out how everything fits together.
Right.
But it's almost the worst place to be, because it's like, okay, you like what you do. You can tell other people like it. You're making no money, or you're losing money.
You don't know how to monetize it.
And you're like, okay, what do I, how do I figure that out? So it's kind of a tough place to be, but a lot of growth happens there too.
Well, I hear a lot of guys say, who are like super successful, and I believe in this wholeheartedly, where taking action is better than indecision.
Yeah.
So do you feel like it was better that you took action and learned lessons through that way?
Or, yeah.
So I guess if that is the better way to do it, what would you say to dudes that are like, well, what about the consequences? They're worried about staying broke, or they're worried about the consequences aspect of it.
Dude, I really don't know. It just kind of like works out. I don't know. I really don't know how to explain it. Like I would always, listen and buy into like the law of the harvest thing, And so, even 5-6 years in when, I mean, dude, I've made the dumbest money. Like there was like a 3-year stretch where I was like a degenerate. Cause I was at some event and I like spoke at this event and my wife texted me and she's like, "Where's the car?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, did I park it?" It had been like I'm serious. It had been like repoed because I forgot. I was just like such a degenerate with anything money, because I was so focused on the creative side.
Yeah.
So I'm like doing all this cool stuff and I'm like, dude, I cannot like get my life together,
Wow.
And
you're focusing on, like, you were hyper focusing on the parts that were probably giving you a lot of fulfillment.
Yeah.
And you didn't put any room in your schedule to focus on the things that kind of suck about entrepreneurship, but are necessary.
Totally. Yeah. And so, I mean, looking back, I'm like, I don't even know how it worked out, but somehow it kind of did. Yeah. And I think you just kind of figure it out. And I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs like that too. And you go, like, you'll be like, man, how did you and I remember actually down in Dallas, one of our buddies down in Dallas, this is like 5 years ago, and he had just sold his company for like 70 million or something. And, he had all the cars, he had the penthouse at the, all that stuff. And I was like, dude, how, and he's like, literally like 6 months ago, like we couldn't make payroll. And then now he's just like, we have this, have a bag. And I think it's just part of it.
Yeah.
What I would kind of say to the risks is like, you have to get really comfortable, like being willing to look over the edge, Yeah. I literally can't even count how many times there's been like, okay, I need to come up with, early on it would be, all right, I need to come up with $2,500 by the end of Friday. And then it would be, 50,000, and then it'd be 300,000. And then every single time I'd be like, this is it. Like, it's over. I'm not gonna be able to do it. Every single time, like last minute, you're just,
dang.
I don't know. I think you just have to get really comfortable, like looking over the edge and being like, hey, if this works, great. I'm going to keep going. If it doesn't work, like I'm going to figure it out. And
did you ever kind of think about, okay, if this doesn't work, I'll do X, Y, and Z? Or you're like, I'm not even thinking like that. I'm just thinking, this is going to work. And if it doesn't, then I'll figure that out too. Yeah. So it's kind of like, everything's like, I'll figure it out. Yeah. Is that what it was?
My buddy, do you know Doug Cartwright? Yeah. We would always talk, like our backup was always, we'd just work at Starbucks, because he'd come to the office and we'd like saying that, we'd like go get Starbucks every time we come by the office, and we're like, dude, like it would be bad. That's a pretty chill spot. So I'm like, I either want to do what I do, or my backup is going to be like, I'm going to be just a super friendly Starbucks dude.
That's awesome. Spell people's names wrong. No, me and Doug, he's going to be on here too. I just got to find time to fly down to LA where he's at now. Yeah. But no, it's so funny because when I was at Vivint, I look at guys like Doug, and Doug was like, he always used to be like Mr. Vivint, right? Everything, his whole personality was Vivint. And then when he pivoted like huge, when he left Vivint, he became his own person and like completely different personality and everything like that. And I had never seen that be done before. Yeah. I was like, what in the world? How the heck is, and since then he started his own thing and he's doing everything. And it's funny, like from what I can gather, he also had that I'll just figure it out kind of mentality, right? When he left Vivint, he was like, when most people, like when I left Vivint too, it's like I'm just going to figure this out. Yeah. Like I know that this isn't the place for me anymore, and I can't keep operating in a place where it's not working, and I got to leave and I'll figure it out. Instead of like taking that, like that, I guess having faith in yourself and betting on yourself was what probably helped you get past those hurdles. Where if you would have sat there and think about what actually needed to be done. Yeah. And if you would have sat in that moment for too long, then you might have like talked yourself out of making action. Yeah. I mean, I think, talking about I think there's different paths. There's obviously different paths you can take. I think the plus to the path that I kind of fell into is there was a lot of things that happened that really the only way out was to keep going, Yeah. It's like when you start a bit, I mean, it's weird how much it revolves around money, but you have like bank lines, and you have, even if you have, I mean, in a month now we'll have 300,000 on a credit card, and so if the business dries up, if it dried up overnight, you'd be like, oh, cool. Shit. All right, nice. I got that still.
Yeah. So there are a few things that happened early on where it was like, all right, the only choice really is to keep going. And I think, the other path you could, so it's almost like I took the path of like stumble through it for 10 years and just make a bunch of stupid decisions, but figure it out. Oh yeah. 100%. I think anyone that says it takes less than 10 years, like, wow, I think they don't, I think they're on the front side of like destruction, you know? I think you just have to go through it.
Because they keep telling themselves, oh, it probably only takes 10 years because they're year 5, but they don't realize it's not next year.
Yeah.
And even though you think next year is going to be the year that you're going to make it.
Yeah.
Or that your business is going to become profitable.
Yeah.
It's not next year.
No.
It's probably not the year after that either. Even though you're very ambitious and you want it to be next year, it's not next year. Right.
And I think you have to go through the cycle of like getting a little bit and then getting humbled, you know? And I think that's what gives you a really sharp mind and a sharp eye for things.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you haven't gone through that yet,
just wait,
watch out for it. Yeah. Or, you know, learn from other people's mistakes or whatever. But I feel like, so I went the path of like stumble through it for 10 years.
Yeah.
You also could, you know, I know a lot of people that are like, hey, you know, they went to medical school for 10 years and then they go practice for 5 years and then they have funds to go do it. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, the MBA route or whatever. But I think the problem with that's funny, where I wouldn't really take it back, is I know a lot of people that went into like, say, the MBA route and then they go get a job at McKinsey or wherever. Right. And then it's like they're too tied into what they're doing. You know, it's hard. It's pretty tough to like leave a 6-figure paying job to be like, oh, I'm going to go start a company and like make nothing for 3 years. Yeah. So I think a lot of people get stuck into that. And I've talked to a lot of people that are like, you know, in their 40s and 50s, they're like, I'm really jealous of what you're doing. And I'm like, dude, there's no way you're jealous of what I do.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
And they're like, well, I just never had, you know, couldn't go do it. So I don't know either way, but I think you got to, you know, pick your path. And
yeah, well, I think a lot of people who regret like not starting their own company and stuff like that. Yeah, they regret it because they didn't live through how hard it was. In actuality, they just see like the guts and they see the glory, right? They don't see the guts, everything that went into getting there. So yeah, someone who sees what you're doing right now, they don't know that it took 10 years. I didn't know it took you 10 years. That's wild. Yeah. And to get to a point where you are, and I feel like that's a really bad thing that's been going around recently, where there's a lot of really successful people that are coming from, you know, a sales background or just straight up coming out of high school and starting their own thing. Yeah. And they just think that they can jump there. And like, well, I know it's going to be hard for like a little bit, but like, I'll make it work and I'll get to where you're at. It's like, dude, if you think it's just kind of like, it's like, oh, I'll put in my dues for a year or two and you're going to get results. No. This is a marathon, man. Yeah. You got to put in for a long time.
Well, you know how they say there's all the stuff there's the stuff you know, the stuff you know you don't know, and then the stuff you don't even know you don't know. You know? Yes. I think that's it's kind of like the book The E-Myth. It's like just because you're a top salesperson, like doesn't mean you know anything about running a team, or just because you can do sales and a team doesn't mean you know anything about fulfilling a product. And
or starting your own company, even if it's a sales company, dude, that doesn't mean you know how to do it. Yeah. Yeah. It drives me insane.
I mean, it's a lot of skills you got to like put together. It's funny. They always say like the jack of all trades is a master of none. Yeah. But it's like the rest, I can't remember the rest of the saying, but it's basically like it is better to be a jack of all trades. It really is. Like absolutely. You're going to have your eye on a lot. Mm-hmm. And as you go through business, you know this, you start to know a little bit about a lot of different things. And then that's where you can act as like the conductor and you can bring it all together. Yeah.
Well, another thing that you get really good at, and one thing I was kind of curious, in the beginning stages, it's just you. Right. Yeah. A lot of times starting off as an entrepreneur, it's a solo game.
It's always we though. Have you noticed that? Like, it is. What are you up to? Oh, we're doing this.
We're doing this.
Who's
but actually, it's like
me.
It's all me.
In my parents' basement.
Yeah. I have different titles. Yeah. Like I'll be in advertisement tomorrow, but then I'm like CEO today. So I guess.
But it is solo. Yeah.
When did you make that transition where, you're solo, and then how did you know, okay, it's time to bring in some help? Because I feel like that's another huge sign of a good entrepreneur. Yeah. Is they know how to delegate and they know how to bring in help when it's needed.
Yeah. You know what? If I'm going to give like an opposite answer, probably what you're looking for. Okay, I think one thing I could have done that probably would have shaved off 5 years or so is right off the bat, I always leaned on other people. Oh. And, I remember actually we had this one product we were sourcing and we were trying to work on this guy that worked at a perfect company and we were trying to get him over. And, we had basically no money to rub together. It was like either hire him or pay for product, and it couldn't work. He wasn't really willing to take the jump. And I remember I was talking to somebody and I'm like, man, what do we do if this guy doesn't come on? And he's like, well, you just go do it. Like just fly to China and go figure it out. And I was like, oh yeah, you can, and, I think early on I had a lot of self-doubt and, I would really like lean on other people, and I would put the success on other people a lot. Well, hey, if I could just get this money, or I bring in this person, this person like was successful in this, they're going to kill it. Yeah. And the hard thing is I don't know. It's really hard. Partners are really tough. Like to find somebody where you're aligned philosophically and you have a similar work ethic and you kind of see the world the same. Mm-hmm. So I would bring on a lot of partners, and then they would either maybe put up some money and then not do anything else, or they would have advice that would want to go down a different road. And, I would kind of go, oh yeah, they must be right. Like they're successful in this. They must be right. Yeah. And I would not trust my own gut. Yeah. And it would get us into trouble.
Well, it's so tough. I mean, a little business that I started with my uncle, actually, I knew me and my uncle operated the same frequency. Yeah. We're going to kill it. And he's like, okay, cool. Well, the dude that's in charge of the software, his name is Michael. He can come on. And yeah, we're going to be a partnership, the three of us. I'm like, sweet. I know the sales, you know the business, he knows the software. Perfect combination. We bring this guy on, and he's the opposite of me and my uncle. Yeah. And I'm like looking at him like, okay, well, like he's a software guy. Of course, it makes sense, right? And we butted heads the whole time. I'm like, well, okay, so we're trying to start a company around what this guy has. Like he kind of is the company. And so we had to try to make it work. Eventually the company failed because the dude just flaked. Like he decided that he didn't want to take as much risk as we wanted to take. And we didn't have the same alignments. I'm like, I looked at my uncle. I'm like, you knew this guy. Like you brought him to the table. Like, why didn't you there's no way that this company could have ever worked because our relationship never could have functioned to make it prosperous.
I think early on, you're so excited at the possibility too, that you're like, it's going to work. It's going to work. But yeah, going through it a few times, like I had a friend I was talking to, and they were talking about this company they were investing in, and this person's from so-and-so. And literally like in 5 questions, you can ask them, you can be like, dude, this is not going to work. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's such a, I'm like, dude, this is what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And then you fast forward a year and they're like, yeah, that's exactly,
that's exactly what happened.
It's like, even on a partnership thing, something as basic as like comp. Like I had a partner where, he had 4 kids. I had no kids. My wife was making good money. Mm-hmm. She's like, hey, go build this thing. So I'm like, hey, I want to take nothing. I want to put everything into the company. And he's like, I have to take like 10 to 12,000 a month or I can't feed my family. Yeah. And I was like, it's fine. We'll still be equal partner. It's like, no, it never works.
No, it's never going to work like that. Yeah. And people say, if you want to continue to have a relationship with someone outside of the business, have really strong contracts. Yeah. Right. So if you have a really strong contract and you go into business with somebody, it could mitigate a lot of those issues. Yeah. But when push comes to shove, sometimes you have this great contract in place, everything sounds good, and then you progress forward and you get down a line and you're like, man, that contract wasn't good. Yeah. We did not foresee X, Y, and Z happening. And in your instance there, it's like, dude, you got to be able to feed your family, but at the same time, the business needs that income.
Yeah. And a lot of times a contract doesn't have it's like a contract might not cover like, hey, cool, but like what happens if we have to make payroll and there's only $5,000 left in the account? Which one of us is taking it that month and who's skipping? Like that's not always spelled out in a contract. You know what I mean?
You can't think of every worst case scenario. Yeah. And so when the worst case scenario comes to bay, you just have to, I guess, rely on the relationship. Otherwise that, relationship will dismantle. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And obviously, communication, it's like, I wish I learned that earlier too, just being really upfront of, hey, this is frustrating, or hey, I'm not feeling good about that. It's like being able to advocate for yourself, I think is pretty tough. Yeah. And, that's one of the skills that took me like years to learn.
Yeah, that's one of those hard lessons. Well, I'm curious too. You mentioned that your wife was doing a job and successful. At what point in the process, or at what point of you like starting a company and stuff like that, did you get married? Was it before? Did you get married before you started the company?
Yeah, when we started dating, I had like 3 companies rolling when we were dating. So it was kind of like kind of the agreement, she's like, I kind of get who you are. I totally get it. I understand. And I was like, hey, I'd always be like, hey, we're going to have this sick life down the road. I promise it's going to be good, but she kind of knew. She was pretty like ride or die. We dated for 5 years. We had a ton of fun. Like she'd come, she came to China with me a couple of times. It was like, It was sick. Like, so it was kind of part of the deal.
She knew what she was getting herself into. Yeah. Yeah. But you guys probably still had like a pretty good conversation, before you actually got married, like, this is going to be what it's like. Did you kind of put like goals and like timelines on it? Or did you just say, hey, this is what's going to be like for the foreseeable future? I don't know what's going to happen.
So that's actually where I was going to, and it's actually been more than 10 years because we got married 10 years ago and so I'm 35 and I started doing stuff when I was like 18. It's coming up on like 20 years, which is insane. It is. Because I think if you would tell somebody, hey, you're going to do this thing and it's going to be dope in 20 years, they'd be like, no, I'm not.
No way.
No way. But Yeah. I mean, it's funny when I was putting goals and hard limits on things, nothing ever worked out. Never. And
Wow.
then I had all this confidence lost of like, why can I not hit this goal? I put this on my vision, all this kind of stuff, and it was actually kind of through COVID stuff where I kind of realized, have you read the book, The Surrender Experiment?
No, sounds awesome though.
Yeah. So Michael Singer's the author. He wrote a book called The Untethered Soul. And it's like, not to lean too far into like the spirituality stuff or whatever, but it's kind of like, your favorite spiritual guru. It's like, he is their favorite you know what I mean? It's like, he's like the guy.
He's top of the top. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like his book, it's incredible. But Surrender Experiment is basically a story where he was like, hey, I'm not going to try to force what I want out of life, and I'm going to be more open to what happens. And did you see The Bear?
Yeah, I saw The Bear.
You know the episode in Copenhagen when he's like, what makes you a good chef? And he's like, there's only so much you can do in the kitchen. You have to be open and get out in public. And
yes.
And that's when interesting ideas come. Kind of that style. And so
that was like such a cool episode too.
Yeah. I know. So right. Basically, like I read that book and I was like, you know what? Like I've been really trying and putting these hard limits and these hard goals. And then I would just feel really bad about myself when I wouldn't hit those goals.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and for mine, it was all around, I'm going to build this company. We're going to raise X amount of money. We're going to sell it for X, and I'm going to walk away and be, I'm going to be the man. It was always that kind of thing.
Oh, so this is just the wrong kind of goals.
Yeah, I think. I mean, in retrospect, yeah. And so I kind of went back and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to really try to build something. I'm just going to get really good at like what's right in front of me and what's right on my plate. And literally, it was literally like that switch. Like that's when everything started kind of coming more effortless, and then we had these opportunities to do these partnerships and buy these companies. And it was like, like when like Nightlights, we bought out one of we're still partners on a couple of things, but we bought out kind of this main partner. And he was like, I couldn't imagine it going to anyone else because you care about it. You guys care about it so much. Yeah. And I was like, if I would have been phoning it in, that opportunity never would have popped up.
Well, it sounds like your goals were almost limiting you because the direction that your company actually did go and the events that you ended up doing, do you feel like if you would have rewinded 2 years, do you think that the goals that you would have set would have been anything close to what actually happened?
No, not even close.
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of times guys will set goals and they're not open to the idea of it going a different direction. Yeah. And so that sounds like kind of what was happening is that, because I know you're not preaching don't set goals for the risk of failing, right? What you're saying is don't set such hardcore goals. Yeah. It's just so that way it's going to limit you from your potential and where the company could go.
Well, yeah, dude, there's actually like a lot of, we've done a couple projects that have opened my eyes a lot to goals. There's a lot of interesting science around goal setting. Yeah. And it's really, I'm not for sure not saying don't set goals, but I think actually in majority of cases, goals are pretty damaging. And so like Chris and Heidi Powell is like one of my besties, and they've helped people lose like, I mean, she's helped. They had a show on ABC. They would help people lose like 200 pounds.
Oh, okay, sweet, yeah.
And we talk a lot about that, where it's like the goal takes you out of the moment. And so if you're like, if your goal is, hey, I'm going to lose 200 pounds, which is probably the equivalent of, hey, I'm going to build the business to 20 million. It's so big that literally your mind can't even get started on it. It's like when you give a kid a plate and you have, or you give them a task and it's like, it's impossible, hey, clean your room. It's like, that's impossible for a 6-year-old. You can't, you have to break it into like, hey, let's just get the shoes put away. Let's get the, and so I think goals actually can be pretty damaging unless you've broken them down into like, hey, here's what I can kind of do next. And so they talk a lot about, really try to focus on like the here and now and today. And, try to get the 5 pounds lost. Don't go for the 4, that kind of deal. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of cool science around goal setting though. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, I love that because you hear guys talk about this all the time. And I think Jimmy Rex maybe was the one that brought this up to my attention, but they say, listen, if you're trying to like do self-work or self-development and stuff like that, don't try to like fix everything all at once. Don't try to become someone completely new. Yeah. It's like, just focus on, okay, what is your highest and best self? Yeah. Think about your highest and best self right now. And then just be that person today. Yeah. If you can just be your highest and best self today. Yeah. And then you are just doing what you need to, and you keep repeating that, then you're going to get to a point where you're being that person, and then you're I guess your ability to be even a higher and better self is going to open up, and you're going to be able to level up in those ways.
Dude, it's so cliche, but it is so true. It's like the C.S. Lewis quote of like, day by day, nothing changes, and you look back and nothing is the same, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, if you look at that day over day, it's like nothing, you know?
Yeah.
And you look back over 2 years. And so that's what I've kind of done over the last couple of years is I'm like, I'm just going to go really heads down, and I'm just going to do my thing, and I'm just going to like get really good at it and get really curious about it and passionate. Nice. And then I don't think it's really the area that I think we have like a bad relationship with goals is that we think that it's our job to like make that thing happen. Right. And it's like, it's really our job to kind of be more open to what falls on your plate.
Yeah.
And it's your job to get really good at what you do. And like you're saying, do that self-work of figuring out like, what are you uniquely good at? What can you give to the world? What can you offer? And then when you do that, I think, again, kind of law of the harvest, I think the right stuff just kind of aligns, you know? And so there's no way I could have sat down and been like, you know, I want to own this type of festival that does this, and then it's going to turn into this thing, and then we're going to like work with it. Like none of that.
Yeah. Cause you can't see the potential of what you can accomplish, 10 years later, 20 years later. I mean, maybe like when you were 18 years old and you had this idea of like starting this marketing company, it was this boring idea of marketing for some like bigger companies or something so catered to who you were right then.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that people got to understand. It's like, listen, as you change as a person and as you experience life events outside of business, you're changing. If you think that a goal that you had set a year previous is the same thing as the result that you're going to get, even though you're almost a different person, you're crazy.
You're crazy.
How can your goals stay the same as you're changing as a different human?
You know what I like a lot? There's an idea where they say you should make your goals in Microsoft Paint, not Excel.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's like make a goal more on how the thing feels to you. Hey, I want to have a company that allows me to do this type of thing where I can travel the world.
More
I can
abstract.
bring my family. I can, and that's more a lot of the goals I have now. I'm like, hey, I want to have companies that generate a lot of revenue, generate a lot of profit, things I can like take care of my team. I want to have like an integrated, I like work-life integration where, I always want to be doing stuff because that's what it's like, work and hobby. Yeah. But I want to be able to like have my family come and, be able to like, have my family come to Europe on a business trip or whatever. It's like, those are kind of more where the goals are now instead of, hey, I want to have this type of company that hits this benchmark in revenue that,
Yeah. Well, no, I agree with that wholeheartedly. This past year, actually, that was the first time when I was sitting down, I was setting goals for 2024.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that it's taken me until my 29th year of my life to realize this. But all the other years previous, I was setting goals. I would think about like business and financial first.
Yeah.
Because that's always kind of like what's forefront on my mind. Yeah. Like, well, I want to make this much money this year. I want to do X, Y, and Z. Well, last year I had a really stark awakening to how valuable my family was. I had my second kid, my son, last year.
Best, right?
Oh my gosh, it's the best.
Yeah.
And so I kind of finally realized, I'm like, you know what? This year is going to be different.
Yeah.
I'm going to set my goals around my family and my number one priorities, my wife, my family, the time that I'm spending with them first. And then let me paint a picture of what the heck my job and stuff like that's going to look like based on these goals.
Yeah.
Right. And so I will say, like, setting goals around what I want to be in like relationships and family.
Yeah.
I don't know if that applies the same.
I totally think so. Yeah.
Because it is like, if you set a goal to be more present as a father, there's nothing that could take that away. Like that's a goal that will last forever, no matter who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I set these goals, I realized like, well, these goals are very valuable. And as I change throughout the course of the year, I can always look at these goals as my North Star.
Yeah.
And I don't have to be worried about pivoting these goals.
Yeah.
Like maybe I can add to the goals, like, oh, I can actually spend more time than I thought.
Yeah.
But I never am going to take away one of these goals. They're there forever.
And and it's not something like, I love a goal like that because it's not a pass fail. Like, hey, being a more present father, it's not like at the end of the year, oh, I didn't hit that number. I'm not.
Yeah.
You can kind of be like, hey, I actually did a good job in these ways. I probably could have done better in these ways. Like, okay, I'm going to keep, it's kind of more of a direction than like hey, did you hit that number? Yes.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah. I love that too.
Yeah.
And it gave me so much clarity on what my goals should be for my business and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the craziest thing, we're 1 quarter into it, I guess. So like we're at the end of April, and I've already changed those goals so much because I'm focusing on these goals.
Yeah.
I added to one, I took away from another, because I'm like, okay, well, adding to this one is going to help me with this goal, and taking away. So these goals are now super fluid.
Yeah.
I'll change them all the time. I'm thinking about these goals, but these ones, the family ones and the important ones and the self-development ones, those are the rock solid ones that I'm focusing on.
Yeah.
And it's been so eye-opening this year to see how the interaction is between the two different kinds of goals.
Has it been easier to kind of find balance? Because that's what I think
so much easier.
Yeah.
Literally, my wife, it's funny, just a couple of weeks ago, she looked at me, she's like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Like, why you're here so much more,
dude.
You're so much more present this year. And last year's at this time is when we were having my son. And she's like, where was this last year? I'm like, well, last year I didn't know this stuff. Like, I've done a lot of work since then. And I joined a men's coaching group and all this kind of stuff to figure this out. But it's funny because she sees it, I see it. And ironically enough, and I've said this a couple of times, but this first quarter is way better than last year's first quarter, monetarily as well, and business wise. So because I'm focusing on what's most important in my life, and I'm getting a lot more fulfillment from that, the money takes care of itself.
I know.
It just takes care of itself.
Dude, I know. And I almost hate what you're saying, because I remember I remember being in the mode where like $2,000 was like life or death. Yeah. And I would hear stuff like that. And I'm like, it's so easy to say on that, but it is so true. Like it really is the truth that it really does kind of happen. I always kind of think of the analogy of, the analogy of the old guy that's sitting at the stove and he's like yelling at it. And he's like, as soon as you give me some heat, then I'll like put in firewood, and it's like just absurd to think like that. Yeah. But we approach that so often. Like, oh, as soon as I like get my bag, then I'll like be able to spend time with you. And it's like, do you know how many people, their kids are 12 and they don't like my son is literally like, we are best homies. Like he's my boy. He's 6.
Oh, so awesome.
I'm like, dude, that's the coolest thing ever that we're, if I go on a business trip, he's like, well, wait, why can't I come? I was there, and I'm like, it's so dope. And I'm like, that is so cool. Yeah.
Well, and also too, because you kind of built this, you've created this with your family. I mean, people talk about like work-life balance and stuff like that. Well, at the same time, as an entrepreneur,
there's no such thing.
Yeah, well, there's no such thing anyways. So if that's your goal, good luck with that. You're not getting that, I promise. But the cool thing is that the fluidity and I guess the work-life balance is, it's all one thing. Yeah. And you can make it into one thing. And you can include your family a lot of times in most entrepreneurial ventures and goals. You can include them in it. Yeah. And they're a part of it. Yeah. And the lessons that I'm sure your son is learning at age 6 about business and about what's possible are probably changing and molding him in major ways.
I know. And it kind of becomes those moments you're looking for. It's cool, dude. It's like, it's pretty special to be able to have a business set up like that. And I think it takes a lot of, I know it's not realistic for everyone. Like some people have to commute or whatever, but that would be like my number one thing. If I could have gone back and like, hey, I want to create this type of deal. Yeah. I think it would have happened a lot faster. The funny thing though, there's 2 things I thought about as we're talking about that. Is one, I'm really surprised how often I'll be in a conversation or, in a deal or working on a project. Yeah. And I almost call back to this like little skill that I picked up, almost like in a video game. It's like you're going through and you like pick up the potion or whatever. And I'll think back to this thing that I kind of learned like 8 years ago. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, that is exactly like this, and you start to see these I'm pretty shocked how often that happens. It almost like gives me goosebumps where I'm like, dude, that's insane.
Yeah. There's a reason I went through that before. Yeah. And I'm now pulling from that. Right. Yeah. And a lot of times these are lessons hard learned in the moment. Right. Yeah. And so like, you think back to expensive. Sounds like that one was expensive.
Yeah. But then you're like,
at least that investment was worth it.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, it's funny, like, and we're just kind of on the first end of this. So it's been pretty interesting to see, but it's funny because we've almost built like what I actually wanted in the first place anyway. Meaning like we have almost kind of this conglomerate of like, really what we've built is kind of this holding co. And we have these we have a couple businesses that we operate on a client relationship. Mm-hmm. Most of our stuff is joint venture. Yeah. And there's all these interesting things popping up. So it's funny. I've talked to a lot, like I've had a ton of friends that have had pretty big exits.
Yeah.
And they sell the company, and it's like there's this big feeling of like existential dread the next day, where it should be like you get that check or that wire, and that should be like the happiest moment ever. And they're like, dude, what do I do now? And what's funny is they're actually trying to build like these holding co's, and they're like, I want to put these different businesses together. And I'm like, dude, that's kind of insane. Like I kind of went the backwards way to get there, but we kind of actually ended up building it. So I guess kind of the takeaway is, I don't know, for listeners, whatever, it's like be more open to what's coming instead of being so demanding on asking for, telling the universe or whatever what you want. It's like be a little more open just and curious about the world.
Yeah. And I feel like if you trust yourself and you have confidence in yourself to make like the right decisions and whatnot, let your feet take you the path that you're supposed to be on. Yeah. You maybe had this idea that you're going to start this company and then it's going to lead to something else, but because you are, a good guy and you are who you are and you're making the right decisions outside of business. Yeah. Your path took you where you should have been, which is way better than what you had before anyways. Totally. And so it's kind of like, listen, if you're worried or if you don't have confidence in the idea of like starting a business, or you start a business and you're worried about like making the right decision here and there, it's like, man, how about this? Instead of worrying about if you make the right decision or not every single time there is a decision to be made, why don't you just worry about building confidence in yourself and working on yourself to the point where, hey, make a decision, make it quickly, make it good, and trust yourself that it's going to take you where you need to go. So 100%. I love that. And like directly ripping off Heidi and Chris again, I was telling you. Yeah. They would always talk about, they're like, you shouldn't focus on. So we did a lot of stuff with them. We like built a bunch of content with them. Like I got to know their whole process and everything, like really, but it was super cool. Awesome. Again, it's one of those things I'm like, dude, that's crazy. I like picked up this little thing, but they would always say like the goal really shouldn't be like pounds off. It should be like promises kept. And so that's how you build confidence, by following through on what you said. Yes. And I'm like, that's so cool. And so I think in entrepreneurship, what that looks like is like, I am shocked how much you can learn about a topic with 1 hour of YouTube and taking notes. Yeah. Like if you want to get in and you're like, hey, I don't know how to like drive traffic to my site, or I don't know how to like work with an influencer, or I can't get anyone to answer the door. Like if you spend 60 minutes on free YouTube and you actually are like pretty, like in it, and you take notes, dude, you could be ahead of almost everybody. It's insane. It's insane. Yeah. And so people are like questioning whether or not like they should hire somebody else to do something. It's like, why don't, before you like question whether you should hire someone, why don't you just go and try to figure it out on your own? Yeah. And if you get to the point where you're banging your head against the wall, or you realize, okay, cool, I can do this, I could be able to do this, but I realize the time is not going to be worth it. Yeah. So I am going to go hire somebody, but now I value that person so much more. And you understand it. You understand it. You can speak the language with that person. And by the way, that's going to save you so much money and heartache going through the wrong people. Yeah. If you can speak let's think of like an editor, right? There's no way on earth I'm going to edit these podcasts. But I knew, I'm like, I don't know anything about editing. Yeah. And if I go find someone, I want to make sure I know someone, like the person's going to do a good job. Yeah. Well, how am I going to know if that person does a good job if I don't know anything about editing? Yeah. So I went on and I downloaded these apps and stuff like that on how to like edit podcasts and so forth. And I'm cruising through. I'm like, all right, this sucks. I knew it was going to suck. This is taking forever. Yeah. And I'm like realizing, like, okay, but I understand the lingo behind it. I understand cut clips, all this kind of stuff. And I also understand, okay, if this took me this much time, let me go find someone that I think is going to cost me what I think is it's worth. Totally. Right? Yeah. Yeah. If you put an hour on your time and then it makes a lot more sense to exactly. Yeah. And so many guys like jump to like finding somebody else to help them with their solutions and so forth before they even give it a shot. And I feel like they first got to give it a shot, learn the lingo, and then go find somebody. Yeah. Yeah. Dude, I love that. Well, we've talked about nothing that we had on our plan, but speaking of being open to go, like, do you want to cover anything sales wise or? No, not at all. Okay, no, I don't care about talking about that stuff at all. No, this is way better. And it's funny what you said about keeping your promises to yourself. Cause have you seen the Conor McGregor, like kind of meme or whatever, where they were interviewing him? And I've seen a ton of those, but I can't. Yeah. Well, it's when he was, I think he lost the fight it was after he lost the fight to Poirier or whatever like that. And he's like, yeah, the problem was like, I tell myself I'd wake up at 7:00 and I'd wake up at 8:00.
Yeah.
I'd say, oh, I'm not going to eat that. And I'd eat that. He's like, I just kept not doing what I said I was going to do.
Yeah.
And he's like, as soon as I started just doing what I said I was going to do in little ways, my confidence got up.
Yeah.
And of course, in his accent, it sounds way better.
Yeah.
But what you
so
just
true,
said
though.
is huge, because it's like, if you say that you're going to learn a topic,
yeah,
then go freaking put in an hour and learn that topic.
Yeah.
Because you don't understand where the dividends are going to be paid later on.
So yeah, one thing I would add to that is I spent a lot of time. I think you really need to spend the time to figure out how you operate as a human. Like, everyone's always everyone's all big on morning routine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I am not a morning person. Like I'm a creative, I'm a night person. I stay up late. My brain doesn't really, I can obviously, like, if you're like, hey, let's go snowboarding tomorrow, I'd be up at 5, I obviously can wake up, but it's like, my brain doesn't really engage until like 9 a.m.
Well, it's about knowing yourself. It's like, listen, if you tell yourself you're going to wake up at 7 a.m. and then you're going to do a cold plunge and you're going to do all these things, and you keep not doing it, it's like, there's probably a reason. Why don't you listen to your body?
Yeah. So don't get mad at yourself. I didn't stick to it's like, kind of change the commitment to fit yourself.
Change it.
Yeah.
Listen to yourself. And in fact, if you are aware of the promises that you're making to yourself, and because way too many people, I think, make a promise to themselves and then they don't ever realize if they followed up with it or not.
Yeah.
If you make a promise to yourself, or you say you're going to do something, commit to it, and then do a check-in later.
Yeah.
Did I do what I said I was going to do? I did it. How many times have I said I'm going to do that, and I did it anyways? Oh, it's been like months now.
Yeah.
Maybe I should listen to my body and listen to myself and change that commitment.
So I learned, that's funny. That's totally true. The accountability thing's big. I worked with this group. They're called Commit Action. It's a cool platform, and
cool.
It's really cool. And their whole thing is just accountability coaching.
Oh,
and they
nice.
you get on like a 30-minute call once a week. And they like, the guy was like, hey, look, you have clients that are like making you, like you have to follow through for them. He's like, no one's holding you accountable to the other stuff, like working on the business and hiring people, She's like, I'm only going to help you with those things. And every week we're going to take three tasks and I'm going to hold you accountable to those.
Oh, okay.
And it was funny because what I kind of learned through the process is I'm like, I'm one of those, I'm like always thinking about the problem, but until there's like a really hard deadline to do it, I'm not going to actually execute it. Like I would have my calls on Thursday and literally like, at 1 or whatever. And like Thursday at 11, I'd be like, dude, I didn't do, and I would just sit down and I would, something that should have taken like hours. I'd be like, I have 2 hours. I'm going to try it. Cause I couldn't get on the call and be like, I didn't do it, So I
the days leading up to it, like, oh, I need to do that. I need to do that. I need to prepare for that. Yeah. I think that's called ADD, bro.
Yeah, but for sure. Yeah. 100%. But yeah, you just sit down and do it in like 30 minutes. It's cool. Yeah. It's pretty cool to have like, so it's tough. I think what we're kind of talking about is a little bit more of a flowy kind of lifestyle, but you do have to be careful that you're not like just, too
I think
chill.
It's flowy, but it's a lifestyle of awareness.
Yeah.
Way too many. I mean, we're talking about this, like you set a goal, be aware of that goal, think about it often and think about where you can pivot, right?
Yeah.
Have it be like a softer goal that you're okay with pivoting from.
Yeah.
Make a promise to yourself, but don't be 100% committed to having to do that promise.
Yeah.
Listen to your body and adjust and pivot.
Yeah.
Because honestly, being an entrepreneur is just solving problems, right? You can solve a problem in a billion different ways.
Yeah.
And so thinking that you have to solve the problems in front of you in one way and committing to that one way is insane.
Dude, it's literally, it's hilarious. I'm reminded of that every day. It's like this morning when I was thinking about coming down to talk to you, I was like, oh, I want to like have a couple. I'm like, all right, I got to think of like a few things, so have like some bombs to drop.
Yeah.
And then I remember, I was driving down. I'm like, no, I just need to be open and have a really good wherever the conversation goes. Like that's where it's supposed to go. You know?
Absolutely.
And that's exactly I'm always reminded that it's insane.
Yeah.
Where if I would have come in and been like, hey, I want to cover this. It would have been like, that's so boring.
Yeah. Well, it's so tough too, because like when you try to force something, like you have the best intentions.
Yeah.
Right. I have the best intentions. I want this to be the best thing I can possibly do, best product, the best service it possibly can be. And I really think that if we do it this way, it's going to be the best way. And it's tough because when you have the best intentions and you're going into something, it's hard to, I don't want to say abandon those intentions when problems come up, but at the same time, it's like, having confidence in yourself and looking at the situation. I feel like being a good maneuver and pivot, being able to pivot
is
just so crucial in entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm curious, like, do you have an example from, you just mentioned that you have a few different times that's happened recently. Do you have an example from your business that
like a pivot like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would actually think, so we do a lot of, I have like very little experience door to door. We kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
But, and I know that's where your like bread and butter is from, but, we do a lot of sales online, and we're like doing a lot of sales psychology. I think we've spent probably like 50 million in ads over 10 years and like direct acquisition Facebook ads. And so that is like, dude, there's 1,000 examples of that. Like, I can't even tell you how many times we started rolling out this testing framework for our ad buying. And that alone is insane. It's like, instead of one video, we'll go in and we'll cut 20 versions of the video.
So it's like A/B testing, A, B, C, D, E, F to
like
K.
Yeah, like A through Z testing. And it's insane. Almost every time we'll kind of pick our winners. Like, we'll go in and be like, all right, we think this one's going to crush it.
Yeah.
And there's one particular one we had like a month ago. Every single one of us was like, this is the best one. This is the worst one.
Yeah.
And the worst one killed it.
Killed it
by like a factor of like,
gosh, isn't
5x.
That insane?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is with all the algorithms and with all the processes and systems that people have out there for advertising and marketing and even content creation, no one's been able to figure it out. There's no one right way. There's no one way to know, okay, for sure, if we follow this plan for our ad, it's going to produce. No.
Yeah. I mean, the mechanics of it are, if it worked, everybody would be. I mean, it's like, you make a piece of content, you put it up, somebody clicks it. It's like, if it was that simple, it's just not.
Yeah,
there's so many variables.
I hear that 1,000 times where it's like, oh, I thought this was going to be great, and it was actually completely different. It was just a video of me doing whatever. And so you hear that from content creators all the time. Like, yeah, I worked really, really hard on these videos, and they got 1,000 views. And then the video that I just threw up because I was sick of putting all this time together got 5 million views. Yeah. And that's the cool thing about it. I'm actually, I'm so, and I hope that never changes. I hope it never changes because the kind of like the surprise, I guess, effect, or like the thrill of not knowing exactly if something's going to work or not, is the fun of it. Yeah. Right.
We've seen another example that pops up with festivals and events. There's, so we've actually started like I don't even want to call it a ticketing company. We have this thing we're kind of building in the background that I think is going to be like pretty monster. Yeah. And it's basically around helping festivals and events figure out that acquisition piece.
Okay. Acquisition of
like, figure out how to, so we go to like a lot of these, we've talked with a ton of these racetracks, for example, and a lot of these guys, like the industry is saying, they're like, well, drag racing is dying. Nobody wants to see drag racing. Mm-hmm. So you got to figure out, make these other events, and that's what's going to keep your venue alive. Oh, the funny thing is, I actually don't think it's dying because like the track we're working with, their events are bigger than they've ever been.
Yeah, that's also Texas.
Yeah,
drag racing in cars.
Yeah,
and anything in Texas
that is true. Yeah. But I think there's waves to things. I mean, dude, there's a few years Formula One was like tiny, and now it's like the biggest thing ever. So I think there's waves to things. Anyway, what I'm getting at is like nobody at this industry show we were at was saying, hey, here's how to actually bring somebody to your space. They're all saying, hey, you should try these things, try these mud runs, try whatever. Yeah. Bring other people to your venue. No one's actually saying how to acquire the customer. Yeah. So we're building kind of like it kind of is the platform, but then it's also like the acquisition method. Yeah. And I totally forget where I was going with this. What was I saying?
Well, it's just a new venture that you started.
Yeah. And the pivot. Yeah. So what we noticed though is a lot of these festivals and these brands, they would kind of look at everyone else and be like, hey, well, so-and-so's selling their tickets for X. And ours is a better lineup. So we should sell our ticket for this, Yeah. So we learned is it's not really about like how you make money on event. And I don't know how well this resonates, but it's been fun to figure out. But how you make money on event is average ticket price and number of tickets sold, right? Right. And so those are two levers you can control. So it's like if you bring down your average ticket price and you sell, way more people come to the event. Yeah. You're actually going to make a lot more money because you have on-site purchase and merch and food and beverage and all this stuff. Yeah. And so we've helped kind of crack and figure that out. And we find with a lot of these festivals we work with where we get into their pricing, and it wasn't actually based on what people were willing to buy. It was based on, well, so-and-so's doing this and we think that our festival is better, so we priced ours higher.
Right.
And it's an interesting lesson because I'm like, the lesson there is really like, dude, focus on you, focus on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look at any other festivals. Don't look at this other stuff. Just focus on where your numbers need to be and how you can, grind that out.
Yeah. Because you're starting like, for example, you're doing a festival because you want to do something different.
Yeah.
Otherwise you just go join the other festival.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you wanted to remake Coachella, then why would you start another Coachella too? Why don't you just go work for them?
Make your own thing.
So if you're making your own thing, why would you keep comparing yourself to the things that aren't what you're doing anyways?
That was pretty tough. I think early in entrepreneurship, I actually had a buyer at a big internet retailer we were working with. And I went in and he's like, well, tell me about your product. And I started going in and like bashing the competitor. Like I was like, well, unlike these guys, we do this. And unlike and he was like, no one else really comes in and talks about the competitor the whole time. Like they actually talk about what they're doing. And I was like, dude, I was I felt like this small.
Yeah.
But it was so key, dude. Like, if you go to a door approach and you're like saying,
oh yeah,
hey, tell us about your company. You're like, well, this other company sucks. It's like, that's not making them want to buy your thing.
Cool, dude. Like maybe I will actually go talk to them. If you don't like them and you're weird, I'll go talk to those guys.
Yeah. That's why I think politics is insane.
Oh, yeah. Like literally that's a whole other realm that doesn't make any sense to me. But I kind of told you that when I got home from my mission living in Europe, I had this like unquenchable desire to like be social and to create, right?
Cool.
And in high school, I had done a whole bunch of like dance parties and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I was huge into like electronic music and trap and all that kind of stuff because I was huge back in 2013.
Yeah, dude.
Anyways, so I got home. I'm like, well, yeah, let's do it. So I created this brand, The Thrill, and I was so excited. And kind of like we were talking before, like I wasn't focused on money whatsoever. And so I go into it. And originally I was like, I just want to freaking throw dance parties. That'll be the funnest thing ever. Right.
Yeah.
And so I do a couple of them and someone asked me, well, what's your goal with this? I'm like, I don't even have a goal with this. Like, I'm just kind of doing this to have fun.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, that's what I think helped it be as successful as it was, is that people are like, oh, he's truly just doing this because he wants to have fun.
Yeah.
And we want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, as a brand owner, your face isn't really on there, like on the brand per se.
Yeah.
But with the business relationships and stuff that you're making, do you feel like it's helpful when you are just like, hey, I'm doing this. Like, yeah, the money is important, but I'm doing this because I want this brand to be as successful as it possibly can be. I'm okay with making changes here and there, just so that way it's getting what it deserves.
Dude. Oh yeah. There's this cool book I just finished called Unreasonable Hospitality. And it talks a lot about that though. Like it's like when you have a really great experience, it's made up of all these micro experiences that you don't even notice, and dude, 100%, like there's 1,000 examples that come to mind, but yeah, it's like all that stuff that you do. I think that's what gives something a lot of heart, a lot of soul. And I think the consumers are pretty smart to that. Yeah. And even if they can't look at it and they don't really understand design or they don't understand product design, there is something intangible that you can feel.
Yes.
Of like, there just is a difference between an Alibaba drop shipper product versus like somebody that sat down and meticulously crafted this thing over to you. There is a feeling, 100%.
Well, I mean, an example I could think of that recently is, I mean, you just saw how like Coachella bombed this year, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like where's the soul in it anymore?
Yeah.
I mean, I know. I've never been to it. I want to go to it, but I've never been to it. And it's funny because I see from an outsider's perspective, who I've never been there before.
Yeah.
But I'm like, from the pictures and the vibes and everything I could tell, I'm like, that's something that's lost its soul.
Yeah. I think the same thing's going to happen with waste management, actually.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Really?
We went down to waste management this year and it's wild. Yeah. And it was kind of so wild. It got like,
that's right.
Now they're going to raise ticket prices by like $500. Oh yeah.
They stopped selling beer and it kind of takes away. And I mean, I guess that's a kind of a really good example too, because I think the event lost its identity.
Yeah.
And because of that, the patrons, and golf, that's what they call it, I don't know, the patrons. Yeah. The patrons took it to a place where they wanted to take it to. Yeah. But because there wasn't someone there like keeping the vision alive and like, hey, it's fun that it is rebellious, but that's why it's fun.
Yeah.
It's not fun because it is a massive party.
Right.
This isn't a massive party with golf.
Right.
It's golf with a little bit of fun that is rebellious nature to it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what happened personally is that they let it turn into this raging party, and that wasn't the identity.
kind of got away from it. That's really that's really the job of like a brand manager.
Yeah.
That's where I end up doing that for a lot of the stuff we do, and I really vibe with it. But I totally get that. Like somebody that's kind of controlling that voice and setting the vibe and the tone of something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. On that note, though, another example that comes to mind is I've stumbled onto this weird documentary. I made this reel about it. It was really fun. About do you know Moby, the artist Moby?
Yeah.
That song Porcelain. And so when he was making Play, he had been making music for like 15 years. And it was literally like, I'll give you a disclaimer after I say the story, because I think there's two sides to it, just like anything. But so he was making music for like 15 years. Nothing was working. He's like barely getting any radio play or whatever.
Yeah, it's very weird kind of sound. Yeah.
Totally like ahead of its time, whatever.
Yeah.
And he sits down. He's like, I'm going to make one last album, and it's just going to be something that I want my friends to be able to have in their homes. And I want something I'm proud of. And so he totally like kind of broke the mold. And it was kind of his like last, like whatever, screw it, throw it away. Like I'm out. He was literally going to walk away from music after.
Yeah.
And he does that album, and it's like, you know, it went like 100x platinum or whatever,
wow.
You know? Yeah. And so I think what he accessed in that, and what I've kind of, there's been times I've almost kind of felt that if it's that flow state or whatever, but it's like you're accessing something that's like universally appealing.
Yeah.
And it's not like, Rick Rubin says, like, you're not the person doing it. You're just the vessel to like channel, and whatever it is, if it's whatever, wherever that source, like you're just the person that's channeling it.
Yeah.
And then you make something and you like put an idea out and you're like, dude, that's really cool. And you almost can feel like the hair on the back of your neck. You're like, dude, that's going to resonate.
Well, you take yourself out of the equation.
Yeah.
Right. You take yourself like, okay, this isn't about what this is going to do for me. Even this isn't about how much, you know, people are going to think about me because I did do this.
Yeah.
This is literally a product or service that I feel like needs to be out there. Yeah. And it doesn't have to have me on it at all. And that's where the true creativeness comes from. Yeah.
And I think the balance and the disclaimer is like, you have to be able to do that and then still be like economically viable.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
And that's because it's like our events we do. It's like, yeah, would the vibe be way cooler if tickets were $2? Like,
yeah,
maybe.
Sure.
But
we'd probably get some pretty crazy people in here that would change the vibe up a little bit.
Yeah. Or would it, you know, be better for fans? But it's like, but it can't be, you know, so you have to find like an economic thing and figure that out. And so that balance is, I think, that's where you kind of go from like starving artist to like mogul, and it's like finding the middle ground is like a really fulfilling place to be, I think.
And I feel like to find the middle ground, you got to try it in both aspects too.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm sure
that's why it takes 10 years.
Yeah. I was like, I'm sure a couple times over that past 10 to 20 years, you've had that happen, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I mean, you're doing some amazing things coming up now too, that you're putting all of these things that you learned into it. I guess the biggest thing that you're coming up with this summer is what exactly?
Yeah, so we have our hands in a couple things that are fun. So kind of our main thing is called Nightlight's event. And so that's the event. It's a lantern festival. It's beautiful. It's cool because it's like, we had somebody at our event last year that was like, dude, this is like a family friendly Burning Man. And I'm like, dude, that's exactly what, you know,
that's the vibe.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like a really vibey place. You come hang out, your family comes. It's like affordable. It's good. You know, it's one night. There's a little bit of danger because there's fire and s'mores.
Yeah.
And everybody comes together for this kind of shared experience, and you send up lanterns. And so it's like, you know, we'll have 10,000 people at an event, and there's 10,000 lanterns in the sky. And it's like, it literally is like seeing a total solar eclipse. It's like, you just cannot describe how cool it is. So we have people that come back to that over and over and over.
Wow. And
that's amazing. Yeah, it's something you have to see at least once.
Yeah.
You got to come out.
I'm going to be there for sure. Absolutely. Where and when is it again?
So we have those all over the country. We have like Utah, Idaho, St. Louis, back east, and then like Detroit. We're kind of all over. And then we've taken that concept and we've merged it with our friends in Dallas. So we've created a festival called the Stars of Texas Music Festival. And so this year we have like Lady A headlining on Sunday, and it's like music and lanterns, and then drag racing and bull riding. Dude, it's insane. So that's really fun. That one's like scaling up like crazy.
Wow. So you're going to have so many different experiences all kind of wrapped up into one.
Yeah.
And it's family friendly.
Yep. Oh, totally. Yeah. And we have like camping and glamping, and it's incredible. Cool. It's a cool. So you got to come out to that. You got to come.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Since I'm going to be down there. Yeah. Because that's what, honestly, Utah needs it really bad, and Texas needs it really bad. You get a 7-point-something million person, actually 8 million person metroplex. Yeah. And the amount of events are ridiculously low. Yeah. People just, for some reason, don't have that creative spark to create things like this. And so the fact that you're branching out to all these different places is amazing.
Yeah, it's cool. And it's, I think you'll see it, and it's like something that like you'll never have seen anything like. It's very different. You'll be like, dude, I did not know this was. It's,
well, you pour. It sounds like you poured so much of yourself into this, and you know, heart and soul, just making sure that, you know, you've taken yourself out of it. You're trying to make it the best experience possible for the people that go there. Yeah. It's
a blast. It's fun.
That's a true sign of someone that's like doing something for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm super excited.
This is fun.
Yeah, this is so fun. I'm super excited to go to your events. And now I'm going to go to your events with like such a bigger kind of like, you know, gratitude, so much more gratitude, because I'm like, this is freaking Shane's work and he's put everything into this. So.
Yeah. The soul, man. That's
exactly. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so much for coming on. No problem.